She didn't confuse you. She revealed where you've never drawn a map. You called her unpredictable, dangerous, magnetic, but she was none of that. She was your projection, a myth built from your silence. Most men don't fall in love with women. They fall into the echo chamber of their unmet soul, and the deeper the echo, the deeper the obsession. Jung didn't romanticize women. He saw something more dangerous, that a man without inner structure will mistake any mirror for a goddess. You weren't seduced, you were disoriented, not by her complexity, but by your lack of compass. This isn't a video about blame. It's a reckoning, a descent into the psychological terrain where most men never look, where women stop being saviors or sirens and become what they've always been, reflections of the man you refuse to become. And if you don't learn to navigate this unconscious map, you'll keep calling chaos love and think it's destiny. He thinks she confused him, that she changed, that her words stopped meaning what they once did. But that's not the truth. She didn't become a maze. He became directionless. And in the absence of inner direction, even a mirror looks like a mystery. You can't navigate a woman when you've never mapped yourself. He says she led him into darkness, that her silence was a riddle, but that silence wasn't coded. It was a reflection. A man with no moral compass will mistake any shadow for seduction. Not because it's seductive, but because chaos looks like home when you're used to inner noise. Jung warned, the unanchored ego projects confusion onto anything it doesn't control. You didn't lose yourself in her. You were already lost. She just stopped pretending otherwise. You kept drawing maps of her moods while refusing to confront your own ruins. You didn't get trapped in her psyche. You wandered into it, looking for yourself. And when you didn't find what you buried, you blamed her walls. You called her unpredictable. But the truth, you had no baseline. You called her emotional. But you never checked your own tides. She became your compass only because you never forged one. And when she stopped pointing north, your entire sense of identity collapsed. That wasn't heartbreak. That was withdrawal from projection. You tried to fix her, define her, diagnose her, because you were terrified of mapping your own silence. She was never your project. You were. But rebuilding yourself hurts more than rewriting her. So instead you turned her into a puzzle, because that's easier than becoming a man. The masculine that hasn't been tested will always seek an anchor in the feminine, but that's not intimacy. It's dependence in disguise. When she shifted, you drowned. Not because she pulled you under, but because you never learned to swim in your own depths. You expected her to be the land, while refusing to grow roots. She wasn't a manipulator, you were a wanderer. She didn't lead you astray. You never chose a path. The truth most men won't face? She didn't change. She simply stopped hiding the parts of herself you refused to claim in you. And when your mirror stopped flattering you, you called it betrayal. Stop mapping her shadows. Start facing your own. Stop reading her silence like a warning. It was an invitation to find your own voice. You didn't fall for her. You fell for the shape of your missing self. And until you rebuild that compass, every woman will feel like a maze. He thought she was deep, poetic, like a novel he was born to read. But the truth, she was ordinary. It was his emptiness that made her profound. When a man is starved of soul, even shadows look like scripture. That wasn't connection. That was hunger, dressed in fantasy. You didn't admire her complexity. You envied her emotional fluency. The way she spoke of pain, the way she lingered in silence. It wasn't her depth that captivated you. It was your numbness echoing through her presence. You weren't drawn to her. You were drawn to what she reflected, a self you never dared to feel. You mistook resonance for destiny. She was not your muse. She was your anesthesia. She gave shape to what you refused to name. Jung warned, projection doesn't see the other. It sanctifies its own absence. You turned her into a goddess because you forgot how to be a man. And in doing so, you worshipped the echo of your unlived life. When you say, "She saved me," what you really mean is, "She distracted me from noticing how hollow I've become." You weren't in love. You were in avoidance, avoiding grief, avoiding direction, avoiding the mirror, because mirrors without substance reflect ghosts. You didn't love her. You loved how you felt in her gaze. And that feeling, fleeting, intoxicating, blinding, was the drug. So you fed it with gifts, with loyalty, with submission, not to honor her, but to maintain the illusion. Because if she stopped looking at you like that, you'd have to look at yourself. You thought she was the answer, but she was the question you never faced. Why do I only feel alive when I'm desired? That's not intimacy, that's dependency. And she wasn't to blame. She just happened to stand where your purpose was supposed to be. You gave her a role you abandoned. Men who abandon their soul end up chasing it through women, through longing, through obsession, through collapse. But it's not her fault that she couldn't hold the weight of your unlived life. You didn't fall for her, you collapsed into her. And now you're wondering why it feels like death every time she leaves. She didn't haunt you, you disappeared in her. She didn't cast a spell. You sedated yourself with projection. She wasn't a prophet. You were lost and called the first echo, truth. And until you reclaim the self you buried in her eyes, you will keep chasing ghosts, calling it fate. You weren't running from her. You were chasing the shape of your own terror. Every time she pulled away, it felt like rejection, but it was your own abandonment you were reliving. She didn't trigger you. She reflected what you've always silenced, and you called it chemistry. That trembling in your chest when she got cold, that wasn't her darkness. It was yours waking up. You mistook her distance for danger, but the real danger was your lack of grounding. You don't fear her. You fear the part of yourself she makes impossible to ignore. She was never the threat, she was the key. Jung wrote, "The unconscious uses projection like puppetry," and you were the puppet, dancing for the ghost of every wound you never named. You didn't stumble into a pattern, you chased it. Because part of you still believes that fear is love, and that love must always hurt. You didn't react to her moods, you reacted to memories. The moments in childhood when love came with conditions, when silence meant punishment, when warmth was earned, not given. She didn't confuse you, she activated your blueprint. And in that blueprint, pain meant connection. She wasn't being cruel, she was being her. But you weren't being you, you were being a boy again, begging not to be left. The masculine that has never faced its grief will call every cold woman a challenge. You didn't love her, you loved surviving her, because survival feels like victory when you've known only emotional war. Your rage, it wasn't about her, it was rage toward the silence in yourself, the grief you buried so deep that it only surfaces in heartbreak. You weren't afraid of losing her, you were afraid that without her, you'd feel nothing. And that's the worst kind of void, the one that confirms your soul's starvation. She didn't make you jealous, she mirrored your insecurity. She didn't make you angry, she awakened your unprocessed sadness. You gave her all your emotional reactions, and she became your compass. But you never asked, why do I only feel alive in conflict? That's not love, that's emotional anesthesia. She wasn't danger, she was your echo. The echo of every part of you that's still unintegrated. You didn't fear her. You feared the truth she made impossible to ignore, that you've built your entire emotional life avoiding one thing, yourself. She didn't steal your strength. You abandoned it. She didn't become your everything. You made her that. Because there were pieces of you you never dared to claim, and instead of facing them, you placed them on her like a crown. But no woman can wear a man's wholeness without collapsing under it. You thought she was emotional, because you weren't. You said she was intense, because you've numbed yourself for years. She was your depth, your intuition, your softness, all outsourced. You didn't love her. You loved what she carried for you. But projection isn't partnership. It's a subtle form of self-abandonment. Jung called it the clumsy attempt to find inner content externally. You didn't realize it, but every time she lit up your soul, you were really watching your exiled parts come alive. The sensuality you repress, the empathy you buried, the chaos you won't own, all reflected back, wrapped in a woman's body. She was never your emotional guide. She was your mirror. And when the mirror cracked, you thought she betrayed you. But she didn't change. Your fantasy did. And the truth? You never wanted her. You wanted to avoid becoming yourself. Because becoming yourself meant facing all you've outsourced. You said she completed you. That's not romance. That's regression. The man who hasn't integrated his fragments will always romanticize the one who holds them until she sets them down. And then he calls her cold, cruel, ungrateful, when in reality, she's just tired of carrying what isn't hers. She wasn't a vessel. You were fragmented. She didn't carry you. She absorbed what you refused to. That's why her moods felt like gospel, because you believed that without her reflection, you had no shape. And that's not love. That's dependency with a poetic name. You didn't lose her. You lost the illusion. And now you're being asked to gather what you left scattered across every failed relationship. Your courage, your chaos, your sensuality, your sadness, all yours to own or project again onto the next woman who makes you feel alive. But aliveness isn't hers to give. It's yours to reclaim. She wasn't your shadow. You were your shadow's keeper. And now that she's gone, you're staring into the dark, realizing she was never the reason for your pain. She was the flashlight, the mirror, the echo, and now it's your turn to become the one who holds the light. You didn't crave her body. You craved what her body symbolized. Not lust, but permission. Permission to feel, to touch, to melt, to collapse into something raw and alive. But instead of claiming your desire, you disguised it as need. And in that disguise, you lost yourself. She didn't tempt you. She revealed the walls you built against your own longing. The way she moved, laughed, lingered, it pierced through your numbness. And you called that danger. Because when a man has waged war against his own sensuality, he mistakes liberation for manipulation. Jung warned, what we repress doesn't die, it distorts. And your desire, buried under shame and control, didn't vanish. It returned wearing her perfume, not because she was powerful, but because you were disconnected. You didn't want her. You wanted your own capacity to feel. You said she was intoxicating, that she ruined you. But she didn't drug you. You were already sedated. She simply lit a match in a room filled with emotional gas. And the explosion? That was your suppressed passion waking up. Not love, not fate, just fire meeting air. The boy who grows up punished for feeling becomes the man who hides his desire behind performance. He doesn't flirt. He calculates. He doesn't surrender. He negotiates. And when a woman doesn't play by his rules, he calls her dangerous. But she wasn't the danger. The danger was what she woke up in you, the sensual animal you buried, the ache you kept locked in silence. She didn't make you weak. She made you feel. And because you weren't taught how to hold your own fire, you blamed her for the burn. To feel isn't feminine, it's human. To want deeply, to ache honestly, to breathe without shame, that is sacred. And the man who shames his own body will always turn women into symbols of temptation, when in truth they were invitations. She wasn't your fall. She was your forgotten self knocking, not to seduce, but to remind. You don't need her curves to feel alive. You need to stop abandoning the parts of you that feel, because once you reclaim your sensuality, seduction loses its power. You thought she played you, twisted your mind, broke your trust. But trust built on projection is a house without walls. She didn't deceive you. You handed her the blueprint, not because she earned it, but because you needed her to mean something. And when she didn't, you called it betrayal. She wasn't the chess master. You were just a piece on your own board. Jung warned, unconscious dynamics don't ask permission. They just act. You weren't seduced. You were complicit. You mistook emotional hunger for loyalty and traded truth for the illusion of connection. You say she had a strategy, but did you notice yours? Did you see how quickly you ignored your own needs to keep her around? How easily you excused red flags, smiled through disrespect just to stay in the warmth of her attention? That's not manipulation. That's self-abandonment with lipstick. She didn't lie. You edited her truth to match your fantasy. You told yourself she was different, that this time it was real. But real doesn't require performance. It doesn't demand that you shrink yourself just to fit inside her comfort. You weren't fooled. You volunteered. Your innocence wasn't real. It was selective. A man pretending not to see what his gut already screamed, because it's easier to play the victim than admit you cooperated in your own emotional ruin. She didn't break your heart. She shattered the role you were acting in. Every time she pulled away, you clung harder. Not because you were weak, but because your worth was on the line. You weren't loving her, you were bargaining with your shadow. The shadow that says, if she stays, you matter. That's not romance. That's emotional roulette. The man who distrusts others but never examines himself is destined to live in cycles of paranoia and collapse. She wasn't your enemy. Your avoidance of self-awareness was. And until you own your own emotional chess game, you'll keep accusing others of playing dirty. She wasn't the player. You just never learned the rules. Because the real rule is this: if you don't claim you're unconscious, someone else will. Not because they're evil, but because you made yourself available to be used. And the most dangerous game is the one you don't know you're playing. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. Every time she shifted, you sank. Her silence pulled you under. Her mood became your weather. But that wasn't love. It was dependency, dressed as devotion. You didn't follow her because you trusted her. You followed her because you never trusted yourself. When you have no inner weight, every ripple feels like a storm. She laughed and you soared. She frowned and you collapsed. That's not intimacy. That's emotional slavery. You weren't responding to her. You were reacting to your own inner emptiness, and you mistook chaos for closeness. Jung taught, emotions don't destroy us. Our resistance to feeling them does. But you never learned how to feel, only how to adapt. To twist, to mold, to please, because if she was happy, maybe you were worth keeping. And if she wasn't, maybe you deserved to disappear. She didn't destabilize you. You outsourced your balance. You gave her the steering wheel, then blamed her for every crash. It wasn't her volatility that wrecked you. It was your refusal to anchor yourself before loving her. A ship with no keel blames the sea for its drowning. You called it passion, but it was panic. A quiet, constant fear that if you didn't sink to her rhythm, you'd be left behind. You weren't navigating a relationship. You were surviving one. The man who's never learned to swim will always fear her tide. He won't hold his center. He'll orbit her emotions. And when she pulls back, he'll collapse inward, not because she took anything, but because he never had anything solid beneath his own feet. Your worth is not tied to her mood. Your peace should not depend on her attention. But as long as your emotional world is defined by her reactions, you'll never feel safe. You'll just feel suspended, not in love, in quicksand. She wasn't the current. You were the driftwood. Not because you're weak, but because you never built your anchor. And until you do, every emotionally unstable woman will feel like a goddess. Until she stops worshipping you. That's not a relationship. That's drowning with music on. She wasn't your future. She was your echo. An echo of everything you postponed, buried, avoided, the dreams you never pursued, the man you never became. And when she entered your life, glowing with chaos and fire, you called it fate because you were starving for meaning. She wasn't magic. She was symbolic, a walking mirror for your unlived desires. You didn't fall for her. You fell for the part of yourself she stirred awake. That fire, it wasn't hers. It was yours, long forgotten, finally provoked. And you mistook it for love. Jung warned, the projected self becomes mythic, and that myth is addictive, because when you have no story of your own, you'll latch onto anyone who offers one that feels like home, even if it's built on borrowed dreams. You saw her and thought, this is the life I was meant for. But were you building it or hiding inside it? A man without vision will always call the woman with intensity his purpose. But that's not purpose, that's emotional outsourcing. She didn't carry your meaning. You handed it to her, her spontaneity, her fire, her untamed soul. They weren't salvation, they were alarms, warning you of how dead you'd become. Not because you lack fire, but because you extinguished it to be liked, safe, predictable. You didn't love her, you loved how she made you feel alive. But aliveness borrowed is never real. And once she stopped feeding your fantasy, you collapsed. Not because she left, but because she took your imagined future with her. You didn't chase her because she was the one. You chased her because you couldn't bear to face the man you never became. She symbolized the life you didn't choose, and instead of grieving that, you worshipped her. She wasn't your muse. She was your missed path. She didn't whisper destiny. She echoed your story. And now her absence isn't emptiness, it's a summons. Not to find someone new, but to finally live the life you once projected onto her. She was never your ending. She was your call to return. She didn't mislead you. She revealed you. Not in the ways you brag about, but in the fractures you still hide, the way you silenced your hunger, the way you twisted yourself into a shape she'd approve of. She wasn't complex, you were incomplete. You called her chaotic. But it was your soul that had no script. You blamed her for being too much, too intense, too unpredictable. But what you feared wasn't her fire. It was that she exposed how little of your own flame you'd learned to carry. She didn't confuse you. She exposed you. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who she wanted, not who they expected, but the man you were before you performed, before you broke, before you bent." And her presence, loud, seductive, terrifying, was just a mirror daring you to remember him. She didn't hold secrets. She held symbols. And if you'd stopped trying to decode her, you might have started translating yourself. Because the real mystery was never her. It was the man you abandoned. Nietzsche said man is condemned to be free. And you tried to hand that freedom to her. Let her carry your purpose. Let her define your worth, until her silence shattered your illusion. Not because she was cruel, but because she couldn't be your cage anymore. She wasn't your salvation. She was your confrontation. Every word she said that stung, a flare from your shadow. Every moment she pulled away, an invitation to stand on your own. And every heartbreak you now carry. That's not ruin, and that's resurrection waiting. Don't abandon her. Don't idolize her. Learn from her. Because what she mirrored is what you must now claim. Not in her eyes, not through another, but in the soul. You keep pretending doesn't need to be reclaimed. She wasn't a mystery to solve. She was the part of you you never dared to love. And now that you've seen her, the question isn't why did she leave? The question is, will you finally come home to the man she reflected? So now what? What if she was never the problem, just the catalyst? What if every heartbreak, every obsession, every collapse wasn't proof of her power, but of the power you refuse to hold? This isn't about fixing women. It's about reclaiming yourself. Because until you embody what you've always projected, you'll keep losing yourself in reflections, calling it love. Ask yourself, why am I drawn to what abandons me? What part of me still believes suffering equals intimacy? Who do I become when no one is watching, when I stop performing and start feeling? And the most brutal question of all, what if everything I chased in her was just what I exiled in me? If that hits something raw, good, because that pain, that's your invitation. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and keep walking this path of brutal self-knowledge and emotional freedom. Before you try to forget her, ask yourself this: what if it wasn't her that broke you, but the unconscious bond you were never aware you formed? In the next video, we'll go deeper into the roots of attachment, illusion, and the pain you keep reliving without knowing why.